Hello, and welcome to the Visible Women Podcast. I'm Corinne Corbett, and along with co-host Kim DeBrew, we put issues related to diversity, inclusion, and appearance in the spotlight and examine how they impact the lives of women of color.
Our discussion today focuses on navigating professional relationships. We all know that the way that we grow professionally depends heavily on the relationships that we have. Our confidence in ourselves is built through the relationships that we have with peers, with coworkers, with our supervisors. And really, relationships are the currency of the workplace. Whether it's a relationship with a mentor, a sponsor, a coworker or colleague, someone that's an ally, those relationships and what you make of them can be critical to your success in the workplace. And the question that I've been in advance of this episode is, what difference does it make if you are a woman of color trying to manage perhaps others' expectations, trying to step into bigger spaces? If you are maybe a CEO or a senior person in the organization and you are the lonely only, how does that affect whether or not you can truly build meaningful connections, whether you can interact out of a place of authenticity and vulnerability? I've been wondering about power dynamics and managing politics and taking risks, and whether in fact it's a very different reality for people of color and specifically women of color. Corinne, any initial thoughts as you think about this topic?
Yes, I have a few. I'm really cognizant that you said relationship as opposed to friendship. And oftentimes we think we have friends at work, but do we really? Do we really develop true friendships in the workplace? And can we? Should that be an expectation for us? Or are we fooling ourselves? Because oftentimes those friendships come with limit, or they are more situational than actual. But, every now and then there are some genuine relationships that you build that turn to friendships outside of the workplace and beyond the workplace. When you talk about, as a woman of color navigating, particularly as a Black woman, because we're Black women, the Washington Post article that Kim McLaren wrote really, really struck me. An excerpt of that was that Aristotle defines friendship as reciprocated goodwill. And it's the goodwill that distinguishes the friendship, is the source of goodwill. So in friendships, she writes, in friendships of pleasure or utility, the bond extends from the benefits we receive from the relationship, either pleasure or usefulness. But Aristotle considered friendships a virtue in which each person values the other person for her own sake and supplies goodwill towards that person even above her own interests. The only perfect form of friendship. Friendships based on personhood endure as long as the person endures. And she goes on to say that the point is that sometimes for Black women, the personhood does not endure. So we are in a unique situation in that sometimes we're not valued as people. And that impacts, relationships we build or not build, the way that we're seen or not seen. It casts a bigger pall over the whole thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's a powerful point. I think there are not firm boundaries, frankly, around some of these titles as perhaps we might think. When I think about some of the staff that I've hired over the years, and I hired them with the intention just to, this is sort of the positive virtue of friendship. I hired them with the intention to just invest in talent, identify in both cases, I'm thinking about women who I thought could do a really great job, who could impact the project I was working on in a positive way. And they have turned out to be, they were professionally just amazing contributors, but they've turned out to be great friends. And so I was thinking about the point that you read about sort of the virtuous nature and kind of beyond the superficial, they were folks, we could see the virtue in one another. We could see the value in one another. So we're going to explore all of this today. We're pleased today to have Noelle Bonham, who's a dear friend, colleague, and soror. She's the founder and chief principal officer of the Minority Exchange Network. Noelle has an extensive career as a certified workforce development professional and licensed clinical therapist. It's through her professional and personal experiences witnessing disadvantaged professionals of color face and navigate their career path that she first figured out how to manage multiple career centers in majority cities like New York and Washington. And so those things prompted Noelle to found the Minority Network Exchange. So Noelle, we're pleased to be in this conversation with you today, and we are excited to hear your perspective on some of the topics that we've been talking about so far. So welcome.
Thank you, ladies, for having me. I really appreciate it.
So when you think about the range of relationships, or if using Corinne's reflection, friendships that happen in the workplace, I'm interested in your definitions of some of the most commonly referred to types of relationships. So when you think about what it means to be a mentor, for example, or a sponsor or a colleague, what are the definitions that you think of?
So I think it's a really great question. Some of the things that struck me from Corinne's analogy from the article she recently read, and some of the things that you've mentioned as well, Kim, are, I think it's important for Black women to have, if they can, because it's not always possible, to have some type of relationship at work. It doesn't have to necessarily be a friendship. I don't ascribe to people being friends in the workplace. I think sometimes that can carry into some areas, in your personal life and things like that. But from a professional standpoint, I think it's really important. I think one of the challenges for Black women as we look to build our careers professionally is some of the challenges we can have when there are few of us as we grow at the top of our particular careers. It may be more difficult to build relationships with other Black women or women of color when there are not that many of you there in the first place, or there may not be that many of you on that level within an organization or a business structure. If you're a CEO or you are a COO, or you have an executive level position within your career or within the organization, it can be a little bit of a challenge. But I do think it is really, really important to have a professional relationship and a network at your job. Even if you're someone that is interested in climbing your career scale, I think it's highly encouraged. I highly encourage individuals to see if they can seek someone out within their organization that might possibly be interested in mentoring them. I think some companies realize the value in mentorship, and they've even started to establish mentorship relationships with employees. But I think, again, it really depends on the organization and the organization structure. But I do believe that it's really important to have those types of relationships in the workplace, particularly for people of color.
So let's just talk a little bit, because let's define a couple of things. A mentor is not a friend most of the time, or it's not based on a friendship. The relationship is not based necessarily on a friendship, but it can turn into a friendship at some point down the line. And I would similarly say that a sponsor and an ally are not necessarily friends either. I would think if the relationship it's friendly, is more collegial than it is, subordinate. But I wanted to talk a little bit about mentorship because it is an important part of business success. What advice would you give to a young person looking for a mentor? Because I've had many people come up to me and say, would you be my mentor, that I've never met? And I have very strong opinions about that, but I'd love to hear yours first.
So it's interesting you say that because I have spent a lot of time working with young professionals and encourage. One of the first things I ask them is, do they have a mentor? And, for them, those that are aspiring in a particular job or environment, I've asked them, is there someone that you've identified at your organization that you would feel comfortable enough to seek them out to be a mentor for you? And for those that don't have that individual in their particular job, I've asked them and instructed them to look at, if they were college graduates, look at their alumni association, right? Or if they were in a Greek letter organization, to look within their organization. If they belong to a church, to look within their church for individuals that may work in their industry that they're interested in their field that they're interested in pursuing. Because I do think that it's very, very important for young people to seek and, if possible, secure and have a mentor. It really, really helps them develop themselves professionally. And also they can get guidance that they otherwise might not have in terms of their, how they're pursuing their career. You can learn a lot from someone who's already been in the industry that you're looking in. But it's difficult. So, you said it's difficult to even ask, right? So you said that, young people have approached you, or people, not necessarily young, have approached you and that you didn't even know to ask you to be their mentor. I commend them for, having the courage to do it, because it takes a lot of courage to ask a stranger, someone that you don't know very well, would they be interested in mentoring, being a mentor for them. But I do think that it's really critical that they look at that. And there's something that they try to obtain. I think people that have been most successful can identify someone who's helped them in their career, even when they didn't think they needed the help, right? Some people have gained mentors because that person saw something in them. And they, through however they may have met, and they had an opportunity to meet them, and that person served as a mentor or a guide for them. So I do think that it's important for young people and people who are aspiring in specific careers, if they don't have anyone, that they try to get someone that can help them and guide them.
You said something very specific, that the mentor saw something in them. And so when I said I have a strong opinion about it, I think for a mentor-mentee relationship to actually, kind of grow roots and stuff like that, you have to have an opportunity to get to know one another, as opposed to, hey, will you be my mentor? And I don't know you and you don't know me. And so I think that those opportunities where that relationship grows organically are the ones. I have scores of mentees, and the majority of them are come from workplace or that I've seen the young person in action and said, or peer in action, and said, I see something in them that I can help develop. Mm-hmm. And that's how it grew. And as opposed to the people who just come up to me and say, can you be my mentor? I feel a lot of pressure there to create a relationship where there might not necessarily be synergy. I don't say no. I just say that, the mentor usually finds you.
Yeah. So I think it can go actually both ways. I have sort of reached out to folks just proactively. I haven't used those exact words, will you be my mentor? But every single question that I asked was in that domain. Tell me what you think. This is what I'm thinking about. What do you think might be a good next choice for my career or the next move that I might make? So I think if you're seeking a mentor, then what you need to have at the ready is really good questions and ways that their advice and their time can be valuable. If they find you, then wow, wonderful, what a gift, right? It's extraordinary if they've identified you. I did want to make one distinction with something that you were talking about earlier, Corinne, the distinction between mentors and sponsors. And Noelle, our dear soror and brilliant businesswoman, Carla Harris, I once heard her say that sponsors speak your name when you're not present. She talked about one talk I heard her give, said that your name is on the top of their top of mind and tip of their tongue. So when they're in conversations about influence, when they're in conversations about what talent is on your staff that we might look at, or who's a young person, or as you would say, Noelle, not a young person, somebody who's more senior who might actually be able to do this. I think those kinds of relationships can be as critical. And frankly, I think you need both. I think you need mentors and sponsors. Certainly as an entrepreneur, having a network that has my work and my abilities and contributions on the tip of their tongue is invaluable. I would say my first is my third year on my own. I mean, literally all of the business that I've gotten up until now has been through networks. It's been through folks who have spoken my name without me being present. So I don't know if you have other reflections. I just want to add one more thing. So what's an ally? An ally is, in my view, and Noelle, you can comment on this as well. It's a similar place. It's a place of influence. But I would say an ally isn't necessarily somebody that can, by their very presence, open doors. An ally is somebody that's in the valley with you, right? They are in spaces that maybe where you can't be, and they can influence a conversation. So an ally, I would say, in some of the workspaces I've been in, like they're in meetings that you're not, and they can talk about the issues that you care about, right? They know what you care about, and they can speak up when you're not there, but aren't necessarily as pivotal decision makers as sponsors are. So those are some distinctions I wanted to draw. And Noelle, any reflections on that?
So yeah, a couple things. So in terms of what Corinne said about going back a little bit about, mentors seeking out individuals on their own. What I will say to that, and I've encouraged people to seek people out because this is a phrase that I use in terms of layman terms. Hungry people eat. If you are hungry, you will find a way to feed yourself. And I remember years ago when I was interested in pursuing a specific career, I went to somebody who I had connections and friends, and I used my network and my friends to try to get me in front of some of these people who were, experts in the industry. And I was willing to pay my own way. All I wanted to do was be at the foot of the person to teach me or for me to absorb things. They weren't interested in being anybody's mentor. Or if they were, they may have been, the person of like mind. They may have wanted to choose their own person. I'll never know, right? But I don't think I want to, I just want to be clear in terms of when I say I encourage people to seek people out, because everybody that's looking to get some help, they can't rely on someone to see them first. They have to sometimes put themselves out there to be seen. And that may mean sending an email or, old school, writing a letter. Like there was a young man who, several people I've seen now on the internet, they're standing outside with their resume and, a sign, or they're, putting them to say that they're looking for a job or they're looking for some help in their career. Sometimes the squeaky wheel will get the oil. So I don't think that, I think that I don't want to not make I want to make sure that we encourage or, at least highlight that, while I think it's great when someone can find you as a diamond in the rough, sometimes you have to you got to dig out your own dirt so somebody can see your potential. Because that's not always something, sometimes you got to be your own archaeologist for somebody to make a discovery. And, that's just the way that it is, especially these days when there's so many things competing for the one position or the few spots. So I do think that it's, important that, and I would hope that people that are in a position to be somebody's mentor sees the tenacity in that person. Like, hey, they went above and beyond to get my attention. Maybe there's something there. I don't, it's worth me seeing. And so I think that I think there's some credit there that needs to, to be given in that regard. In terms of sponsors, and sort of champions and allies, I think, Kim, you're absolutely right. I think that there is opportunity there to have those types of relationships at work, where there's someone who can be in the room that, like you said, that can sort of speak to your cause, whatever that may be in the workplace, or they understand at least, what your needs are. I think we all have that type of, it would be great, I should say, if we could all have those types of relationships at work with your colleagues or your peers that are allies and can actually speak to speak to whom you are or what it is that you're working on. And also having this, that sponsor or champion in the room that can help move your career along. Sometimes it may not even be the person that directly works with you, or works within your department. It might be someone even above and beyond that just sees the work that you're doing. And so that's why I think it's encouraged when you can to, let people know how much hard work can actually pay off, because people can, hopefully will notice it and put your name out there so that you can have those opportunities to grow. But as I said before, I do think that if you can get someone even outside of your job that could possibly sponsor you, that might be in the career that you're interested in or you already are working in, they may be able to move mountains for you in other organizations that you're not even in.
I totally agree with you. And I do want to make a distinction between will you be my mentor and can I get some advice about a job? I'm looking for a job. And I totally agree with Hungry People Eat. And I do think that we have to make sure that if you are searching or searching for a job, searching for information, and that you're bold, that you take the step and are bold to reach out to somebody in any way that you see fit. And if you have the opportunity to sit at the feet of someone that you've done your research and you make the most of the opportunity, I think that that's also important. But I wanted to ask another question. So as a woman of color, what are the unique challenges that we may face in terms of finding allies, people that are going to help us in our careers, and who should we be looking for? What are the challenges that we're facing in terms of the cultural dynamics that we've grown up in that may impact our ability to create those relationships at work?
So I think those are great questions. So I think a lot of it's contingent upon the type of career that one has, right? Because I think in the varying organizational structures, depending on one's career track, there may or may not be other people that look like us, in their career. I think, for example, a lot of organizations are now pushing more for diversity. They realize, for example, that there may be few of us represented at the table. When you look at companies like a Google or Facebook, the percentage of Black people or people of color that work within those organizations that are African American, those numbers are not in the double digits, right? And so if you are a woman of color coming in, there are even fewer Black women in STEM jobs, sciences and things of that nature, and particularly at some of those organizations. Facebook recently, hired, I believe it was Facebook that's recently hired an assistant that's going to be working in an executive level that's there. But again, there's so few of us. Many, particularly young people, they're not interested in being the pioneer that our parents, the first, you would think now that there wouldn't be still the first Black this or the first Black that, but we still have that, which means that we have far to go. And I think in terms of what women may be looking for, Black women, that sort of network within the organizational structure, a lot of that is really contingent upon the company and the organization that they work in. I take myself, for example, when I worked in the public sector, there are lots of Black people that work in the public sector and in nonprofits, depending on the particular industry that it's in. When you're in human services and in helping professions, you tend to find more Black women than anything else. And so, yes, there were a plethora of Black women who looked like me. And even on the executive level, they looked like me too. So that was refreshing, right? Because I didn't have to look far. But even within that organizational construct, I had to create a network of my own within that organization. Ironically enough, because I am in a sorority, it was very easy for me to walk in the door. Once people found out that I was a Delta, they came out of the woodwork to say, hey, from every department. So I didn't have to work very hard to create a network there. But for, I think, women that that don't have necessarily that type of experience, it can be a little bit daunting on how you come into an organization and you network with other people who look like you, particularly when you work in an organization where there may be few of you there. And I think in those instances, you have to look outside of your organizational structure for support and create your own network elsewhere. That's why I always encourage people, do you belong to a professional organization? Because a lot of different fields have professional organizations. And if they do, there may be an opportunity for you to network with people within that organization that can give you some support, even though you cannot necessarily get it in your workplace. Also, I think we have to sometimes look beyond gender. You may have to look at getting sponsorship, networking, mentorship from other people that don't look like you in terms of gender. I've worked in organizations where actually some white men were much more helpful, and I've had better experience, and this is hard for me to say, but I have had better experience working for white heterosexual men or gay men than I have for working for Black women. And that's the truth. I have had some rough experiences working for Black women, and I'm not sure where it came from, because the women ranged in age and background. But I still had challenges. So I think we have to also look at, I think it's a question for this, this discussion, as well as even future discussions about, even as Black women, working and supporting one another when we are the ones in the position to be able to do it, to hire and mentor and sponsor and be an ally, why we sometimes have challenges.
So Noelle, I have to jump in on that one, because you just preached a sermon right there, my sister. I have very, very similar experiences when I think about the biggest, most bold moves that I've made professionally, the biggest advances. They have been with white heterosexual males, frankly, a generation older than me, being my advocates, wanting to see me shine, opening doors, and actually kicking in doors and going, this is my person. And so it is a painful notion to even say that. And here's what I would say as to the why. This is my offering, and I'm curious about whether or not both of you agree with this. Look, systems of oppression are weaved into everything that we say and do, right? And as Black women, we are vulnerable to them as well, right? If you make it in the door, you may or may not want others to make it in the door. You may find that the presence of others who look like you really, is not a comfort, right? Or that you're triggered in some way and you want to, say, look, I made it. Let me haze you up a little bit. So that has pathology, right? That frankly, we're not responsible for. It is just what we're reacting to. And so in that way, I look at sisters who have not been that supportive of me and my career with compassionate eyes. I'm glad I'm not working for them and with them anymore. But I try to have my gaze be compassionate and go, well, all right, so that didn't really work. Let's move on to something else. So I don't know if that's helpful or if that's resonant with your experience, Noelle, but I'll just say that the amen goes right there.
I definitely agree with you. And it's interesting because, like you said, when you examine or you're conscious, I should say, enough to be examined, once you can look past the hurt, right? Because that's the first thing. You're like, oh my, but why would she do that? Why is that happening to me? We're mirror images of one another. Then you can see, there are other underlying things. And you definitely, when you're more conscious, it becomes more cognizant. And sometimes the realization is even after the fact. And so that's, again, and that's why I always say, because even if you're in a workspace where you're having those challenges with people that look like you need a network. I'm always going to go back to, you need your network, your support. That's why I said sometimes you have to get it with outside of your organization. When I mean organization, I mean your place of business, your your company structure, because the support may not lie there. We always hope it does, because for many people, many of us, women, we want to advance in our career track, and we would love to have a promotion while we're within a company, right? Who doesn't? I know I've always wanted, you apply for jobs and you want someone, to Corinne's point, to see you and the value that you have to add so that they can identify you before you even identify them, to say, I want to choose this person because I think I can give them more. I've been able to do that. And I know that for me, when I don't know about you all, I was so happy when I got to a place where I could be a hiring manager, where I could select people. I felt like I overcame, even, as a Black woman, because I was in a position to be able to make decisions about hiring people and being able to mentor them and do things with them professionally, because I had risen in my career. So that gave me an opportunity to help other people. And I was very, very excited about that. So I believe that there are lots of people within business organizational structures that want to be that person for somebody.
Okay, I'm going to chime in and say, okay, three's the charm, because we've all been in that experience where we've had people that look like us who may have disappointed us in some way in their lack of support, and sometimes in sabotaging us in our careers. And all we can say is go with God and keep it moving. However, I wanted to transition a little bit in terms of, let's talk about, you do work with young people and the way in which they navigate relationships has a big online presence. So what advice do you give young people in creating relationships and parameters that involve their digital life as well?
Oh my goodness, that's a great question. And it's so difficult because young people these days, they live their entire lives, on social media. And unfortunately for them, sometimes I think that can hinder them, because it's not necessarily so much of their digital footprint. It's because they don't know how to work interpersonally with people anymore, because they do so many things online. And although we have a large millennial presence that are coming in the workplace, they're still not in positions of to hire individuals and to make those types of decisions in terms from a personnel perspective. So I think it's really important, and I've shared with young people that I work with, to be mindful about what they put on social media. But I think it's incumbent upon universities and colleges, for those young people that have an opportunity to seek a higher education to teach and model more about interpersonal relationships and how to interview, how to behave in the workplace. Many young people have found themselves having challenges in the workplace because of workplace behavior. And so focusing on networking is great from a social media standpoint. So I have, when I say we, the Minority Network Exchange, we encourage young people to follow companies because that's a great way for you to learn about the organization, learn about the people that work in the organization, follow actual people that work in an organization that you're interested in, find out if they're interested in working there or getting to know the company and the business and the industry. So those things I think are very important to use those tools to be able to apply for positions as well, because a lot of companies are using geo mapping and things like that now. So that can help them find employment opportunities. But I'd still tell them to refrain from posting certain things on the internet, because once it's on, their social media pages, they can't always scrub those things clean. And to really focus on privacy and how much they want people to see about themselves, because that can still have an impact on their ability to be able to climb the career ladder.
I just want to jump in one more thing in regards to this. So we talked a lot about finding support within an organization, but we also know that many younger generations don't stay in jobs that long. So creating relationships in industry, then in the industry of choice, or the industries you're interested in, because you may change industries, is even more important. Could you give us any thoughts or guidance on that?
So I absolutely agree. Lots of young people, we've seen data that supports that many of them do not stay. They are not the baby boomers, the Gen X's. They do not stay in jobs very long. So that's why I encourage them to follow, and if they're utilizing social media, which many of them are, following the industries that they're interested in and following the people, because now a lot of people have their own handles, so they can follow those individuals and to see in terms of company structure, not structure, but company-wise or industry-wise, I should say, if that's something that they're still interested in pursuing. That's why I also encourage, if there's a professional organization that they can belong to be able to do that, because those organizational relationships can last long after they've left the company, right? So if you are an engineer belonging to the National Association of Black Engineers, because you can do that and still while you're trying to figure out whether or not you want to be an engineer. And so those things I think are very, very important. If those organizations exist, if the young person is interested in a specific career, that having a membership or an association, because you can follow those organizations even if you haven't committed to being a member. And if you're interested in following specific people, you can do that while you're determining what it is that you want to do within your career. So I think that those things are important. I do understand, having worked with a lot of young people, how difficult it is for them to kind of hone in on their careers, and also to getting them to understand that staying within, staying at a organization, a business, a company for more than 2 years, that's a huge commitment for them. And I don't necessarily know we've figured out quite yet what the next steps for them are, because some of that I think is just, I think as a society, especially those of us that are older than millennials, we're also learning how to deal with handling how they jump from one job or even one career to another, and how difficult it is for them to even make a decision.
My next question is just a curiosity before we wrap up. So when you think about social media, I have been kind of resolute in some ways about my social media presence. I use one platform only for friends. I use one only professionally. And now that I have my own business, I feel like it's becoming a little bit more muted, right? I have I rely on more friends to make introductions for business. So I'm having to think about it in a slightly different way. And I'm wondering, as we are negotiating those relationships and the world's become more interconnected, if you have any hard guardrails for yourself or you or Corinne, in how you engage in the sort of the more social, personal, and professional spaces.
So for me, I think one of the challenges is because I'm not a millennial, right? It's making sure that my social media, my digital presence is on every platform. So I think that that's something that we don't necessarily think about. I think for some of us, we can be more linear in our thinking, and to reach broader audiences and a lot of the discussions and topics and things and services that we may offer, have more of a global reach. You need to have access on multiple platforms and all types, whether it's visual, through your YouTube, through your podcast, through your handles with Twitter and Instagram. And I was shocked at the number of adults that use Snapchat. Come on, let's talk about, okay? That's like people over 45 use that, but clearly they do, and they don't all have kids. So when you think about the your digital footprint and the platforms that you have to use, in LinkedIn, and all these and all these different things, I think you just have to be amenable to it. And at some point you have to be less comfortable with putting your information out there for it to be absorbed, because in order for it to be absorbed, you have to be willing to have it across multiple platforms and have people, have access to it. In terms of, I think from a refrain perspective, right, in terms of what else you put out there, I think, it's just it's almost like your business or your company you have to have a professional persona and then a personal one, is making yourself accessible on multiple platforms.
I think it's part and parcel of the way that we have to do business in these days. So it's something to be comfortable with, and always being aware of what's next in terms of what people are using and and how they can benefit us in the lives and the businesses that we run.
So final question, Noelle. When you think about, the sort of the arc of the conversation we've been having today, are there any closing tips that you might give to our listeners about managing the range of relationships we talked about and the range of networks and ways that you could mine those relationships for your advantage? Any tips that come to mind?
Absolutely. I definitely think that, like I said, depending on what business or industry you're in, if there's an opportunity for you, sometimes you have to do a little bit of a, like a sort of scan, if you will, to see if there are, people that you not only admire their work, but, you've seen how they interact with other people and things of that nature. And if you feel comfortable enough to approach them or get an opportunity to work with them, because sometimes work environments will put you together with other people. If you can establish a relationship where they may be able to mentor you or could possibly be an ally or someone that you could just get advice from. Everyone doesn't have to be your mentor for you to be able to seek some good career advice or professional advice from, to be able to do that. And then to also look at opportunities maybe outside of your business organization to obtain a mentor, if that's something, again, that's possible, or even a sponsor, particularly in those areas where you know that, you want to advance your career and you're going to need some help to propel you forward. Having a sponsor to do that, I think is definitely advantageous. And I don't want to say being aggressive, right? Because we don't want people to necessarily become overly pushy on someone. But if there's an opportunity for you to, to work a little bit harder, shine a little bit brighter, or to make your introduction of yourself to someone and explain to them why, or share with them why you believe that, you might be someone that you'd want to work with, and they would be somebody that could work with you to solicit that and see what happens. You don't. I'll share with you advice my mother tells me. They can only tell you no. So, that would definitely encourage people to do that.
Tell us how we can find out more about your current work.
So the Minority Network Exchange, you can follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, and you can reach us at theminoritynetworkexchange.com to hear more about what we're doing and where we'll be next.
Wonderful. Noelle, thank you so much for joining our show today. We're so excited to have you, and we wish you all the best.